Formula E cars are rapid. They can accelerate faster than an F1 car while having less mechanical and aerodynamic grip, which makes them harder to drive on the limit, which leads to spectacular and sometimes odd pictures from the races. And because these cars are so fast, you want to make sure that your brakes are up to the task when you race around with over 200 miles per hour. But anyone who has been following Formula E for some time knows that they are evolving their cars pretty quickly. But before I explain to you how Formula E has changed the way their cars brake, let me first show you how cars have been braking up until now. The first real types of brakes that you could activate with your foot were invented in the early 1900s, so-called drum brakes. Although they are relatively cheap and have a long lifespan, they still have some problems, such as overheating and a thing called grabbing, where basically when you apply the brakes, at a certain point the wheels will get stuck, making the car impossible to save and sending you straight into the hospital. Thankfully, around the same time another system got invented, which we all know because we still use it in our cars up until now. The so-called disc brakes. But one aspect that makes disc brakes the way better choice over drum brakes is that they can offer better stopping power and heat dissipation, like I already mentioned. That makes disc brakes the better option for performance-oriented vehicles like a motorsport. And back in the days when both systems were still used at events like Le Mans, teams got creative to reduce the lack of braking power. For example, Mercedes installed a large air brake on the back of their 300 SLR for the 1955 24 Hours of Le Mans to be able to stand a chance against the back then new disc brakes which their main competitor Jaguar used. This massive flat would race when the driver pressed the brakes, increasing the drag of the car and slowing it down. But disc brakes were already back then the far better choice for a car. And although both normal road cars and racing cars use this system, there is still a little bit of a difference between a normal family van and the proper racing car like in Formula 1. While the brake discs in your everyday road car is easier to maintain and cheaper, series like WEC or Formula 1 use carbon or ceramic brakes in order to withstand these extreme forces that go through them. And on top of that, a system called brake-by-wire is used in series like Formula 1 since 2014 when the hybrid era started. Formula E goes a step further now, basically removing the brake system from the rear of their car. So let me explain to you how they do that. It all starts with the driver who presses the brake pedal to slow the car down. Sensors then measure the pedal pressure and send it back to the powertrain computer. He controls how much torque to pull back from the electrical motors to slow the car down. The system then tells the electrical motors at the rear to flip their usual role. So instead of consuming electricity to move forward, they now recharge while running the rears in reverse. The wheels help to turn the motor, creating an electromagnetic field to slow the car down, and, with the energy that is generated, recharging the battery. And that is an extremely positive effect of the new system. Because of this, Formula E is now able to regenerate up to 40% of its energy during the race. This not only makes the cars more efficient, but could also lead to seeing the system being used in everyday road cars in a few years. And although the system looks very promising, there are still a few risks that we shouldn't leave unmentioned here. Because although Formula E cars don't need any classical rear brakes anymore, they now heavily rely on electricity and software. So if the car runs into an electrical issue during the race, they basically can't use their rear brakes anymore because they heavily rely on the electrical system of the car. And because Formula E mainly races around tight and twisty street circuits, a failure of your electrical system might lead to a huge crash. And if you watch the race of Formula E, you know that the drivers there are known for large braking maneuvers, deep dives into heavy braking zones, and just situations in which the drivers demand a lot from the brakes. Thankfully, Formula E is already aware of the potential risk and has introduced an emergency rear brake system which the team software can activate to prevent the driver from having a huge crash. Unfortunately, this emergency brake system does a lot of damage to the rear of the car and basically takes you out of the race once it's activated. But for me though, this is a good solution to not only minimize the risk, but also give us a glimpse into the future of how we might not only slow our cars down in the future, but also recharge it while driving. But that is just my opinion. What do you think about this new system? Do you think we could see it being used in electrical road cars in a few years? Let me know in the comments down below. Check out the other videos I've already uploaded, and see you next time.